All right. We are basing our talk again on the Pasha of the week, which is Behar and Bechukoisai. In this Pasha, there's one of the mitzvah of this Pasha, namely, centrally, Shemitah and Yovel.
What's Yovel?
Yovel. I'll explain it. They give us a quite a different perspective on the new Torah mitzvahs, on our relationship with Hashem, of the centrality, the importance and the great effect of Hashem's presence with us. Generally, in mitzvahs, there are two types of mitzvahs. There's mitzvah that's called Chayvas Gavro and Chayvas Hefza, and I'll explain what that means. The word Chayvas means the obligation. The obligation of the man, of the person, or the obligation of the article, the object, Chayvas Hefza. For instance, to put on tefillin. There is no obligation to have tefillin in your cupboard. The obligation is on you to put on tefillin. And if you don't put on tefillin, you miss doing the mitzvah. The mitzvah, an important mitzvah tefillin. Take Shabbos, for instance. Shabbos is also something that you have to keep Shabbos. But Shabbos comes automatically. You don't. We have a mitzvah to declare Shabbos, to make Kiddush, and so forth. But that's because that's our way of reading the Shabbos. But the Shabbos comes automatically. The day of Shabbos is a holy day, made by Hashem. Yes.
But is there a mitzvah, like, if you didn't do Kiddush or didn't do anything, is there a mitzvah that you get because of Shabbos?
Yeah, sure. If you didn't do it, if you didn't do any malachos, you ate some Shabbos, you didn't even make Kiddush. Of course.
So what's the Kiddush Seder is an extra mitzvah?
Mm-hmm. One of the mitzvahs of Shabbos, you have to make Kiddush. You have to declare Shabbos has come. You have to make Havdalah, declare that Shabbos has left.
So if you do malacha for, let's say, 1 week, you had by accident, you did something wrong.
Say again.
If you did by accident, you did something wrong. Turn the light back. Something on Shabbos you did, but you turned on by accident or something like that.
You're young, man.
With turning off by accident into something like regarding those things on Shabbos, do you still get the mess of Shabbos? Even if you did it by accident? Let's say 1 week. Like,
if you did by accident in a malacha on Shabbos.
Yeah.
So you did by accident. You didn't desecrate the whole Shabbos.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Shabbos is still Shabbos, of course.
Kids on the fast, they vaccinated a little something yesterday, I broke my fast, I broke Shabbos.
No, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist at all. Like in the halacha, that before you eat, you have to make a bracha. Right? What if you took a bite without a bracha? Should you then continue to eat without a bracha? Spit out or don't spit out, and you swallowed it already, you can't spit it out. You make a bracha, you're not allowed to eat more just because you already ate without a bracha. It's nothing to do with it. My point is this.
You make a bracha with it in your mouth, is that right?
There are halachas about this. If you if you can push it on the side that it wouldn't interfere with how you pronounce the bracha, then you can do it. Otherwise, you spit it out and make the bracha. Okay, so let's focus back on what I'm trying to explain. There are mitzvahs that are the obligation of the individual person. Then there are mitzvahs that actually apply to the object itself, like Shabbos. You don't have to accept Shabbos for Shabbos to be Shabbos. Shabbos is Shabbos by virtue of the fact that this is how it is. The Rebbe created the world in 6 days, and the 7th day is Shabbos, and that continues on since creation for the last 5,500 years. It's the same cycle. It's exactly the same Shabbos. Okay, so these are the two types of mitzvahs that generally we have. However, even in the mitzvah of Chevas Hefzer, what's called the object, like Shabbos itself, it's still how is Shabbos defined? In other words, what does Shabbos do? What is the effect of Shabbos? The effect of Shabbos is that we have to do certain mitzvahs, and we have to abstain from doing certain acts. The effect of the Shabbos is still translated in terms of the human being, what he is supposed to do, what he is not allowed to do. Let's say a hypothetical illustration in the English. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. Not allowed to cook on Shabbos. Not allowed to cook on Shabbos. As the Torah says, on Shabbos you can't cook. Therefore, let's just go for a wild trip. If you cook something on Shabbos, it doesn't get cooked. There's no such thing. If you cook something on Shabbos, it's going to get cooked. And you have Rahman Salam Aveilah cooking on Shabbos. It doesn't happen by itself. It's something which has to do with how you do it, with the person. The Rebbe gave you a mitzvah, and now it's up to you to keep it, or Hashem not to keep it. Then, in our Pasha, come a different category of mitzvah. The category of mitzvah of Shemitah, and then beyond mitzvah of Yovel. What is Shemitah? That just as there are 7 days in a week, there's a cycle of 7, 6 and 1. The Torah says that similarly in the land there is also a cycle of 7 years. 6 years you till the land, and in 1 year you do not touch the land. You do not till the land. And what happens on that 1 year? The earth is still going to be producing fruit. Let's say, even if you don't plant, the trees are going to continue their natural process of producing fruit.
So you could water them, yeah?
Huh?
You could water them if they want to die.
No, you're not supposed to.
You're allowed to water only that the tree shouldn't die, right? Not to make it grow better. And it shouldn't. So the tree will still produce. There's another form of production, and on Shmita here you learn Sfichim. What are Sfichim? Sfichim is aftergrowth. That's what the Pastor mentioned. Sfichim ksicha. What is Sfichim? That as you're harvesting your produce, you're cutting the wheat, it's inevitable. What inevitable means? It's impossible not to happen. It's inevitable. For sure, some kernels are going to fall out of the stalk and fall into the ground.
For others to cover.
And when these kernels fall into the ground, they remain in the ground. Nobody's going to pick out these kernels. And they get buried into the ground. Next year around, they grow. That's called sfichim. They grow produce without your planting it. What happens to this produce? The din of this produce is that it becomes holy. It belongs to Shvis. And what does this holiness mean? How is it translated? This holiness is you're permitted to eat it, but the ownership of the land has been taken away from you. It's like you're eating from someone else's land. You cannot claim ownership of the land. You cannot block away anyone from entering your land to take the fruit. This is what it means. It doesn't belong to you. You eat the same way as anyone else eats. Not only that you're equal to other people, but the land is taken away from you literally. It reverts back to the hands of God, and now it becomes accessible. It has to be left accessible to all human beings and to animals. You can't prevent animals from coming into your field to eat your fruit.
Shemitah is also animals?
What?
Shemitah is also animals?
I'm sorry?
On Shemitah, it's also animals or after the Shemitah?
On Shemitah, it's also...
Like you let animals?
Yeah, you leave the animals here. Even the chayas. Not only that, if you took some fruit from the field, some produce from the field, from the sfichi, which you're allowed to take into the house, as long as you leave something over in the field. So you take something in the house, and then you check the field, and you see that the field is now empty. Everything has been eaten up. You have to take what you brought into the house and put it back into the field. You can eat only from your field as long as this is open for everyone else. For the chayas, for the animals. Not behemoths. Behemoths means people that are domesticated animals. Behemoths you're supposed to feed. You're supposed to take care of them. They don't have the nature to go and find food for themselves. But animals, they roam in the wild. They have no obligation. They have no responsibility for animals. And yet, on Shvis, you cannot block them off from your field. What does this mean? It means literally, automatically, you don't have to give it away. Automatically, Hashem claims the land back. And He says it doesn't belong to you. You can't fulfill it. And everything that it produces belongs to everyone. To the whole world.
The people that come in to get from, say, I have a few in the Shemitah year, they could come and collect whatever they want and go about.
Fruit.
They could collect whatever fruit they want and go and eat it at home.
Yeah.
They could sign up.
But that's a soil. This is the din now.
So I
Is it
can
Shemitah?
walk up to a...
Not today, not this year. What?
I can walk up to a tree and take like the fruits and all that?
Yeah. You can't take the tree.
No, but now it's Shemitah.
You can't damage the field. You're not allowed to damage the field. But as far as the produce of the field is concerned, it's yours. You take whatever you want, take it into your house and eat.
With a tractor, you could do that
Huh?
you could do that like a tractor, like actually, take out the
A
tractor.
tractor, the thing is like this, you can use a tractor. The thing is, you cannot take for commercial purposes. You're not allowed to sell this. It cannot be used commercially. So this is for your personal use.
What about the 6th day? Said
The what?
The 6th year is going to produce for 3 years. This happened also right now in Israel?
By his farm, probably. If he keeps Shemitah properly.
We got it, but anyways, we can go fruit trees and country.
So it grows more in the 6th year?
It's a real pain to do it. I mean,
So it grows more in the 6th year for 3 years?
Because they're for Shemitah.
Huh?
The last time the Shemitah was in Israel, it's a real pain.
It's very
Every place you have to go, you have to have Shemitah.
That happens when all Yidden keep Shemitah, not in isolated cases.
Actually,
The Rebbe
it
shall
happened,
have-
it happened by my father was in a Hefshan. There was one there was a field next to them, and there was a basket bananas. And they feel they kept Shemitah well. And one next to it was a Hesher that didn't keep it so well, or whatever. They had problems going on there, and they couldn't. They're complaining to us. They're saying they told the people that on the field that they can't. They started doing comments, so they took the Hesher, the other Hesher. And the one that my father worked in, that Hesher, the field, but there was this whole storm or something, brought a lot of sand, directly over the bananas of the other one. There's just a little gate between the two fields. That one I saw pictures, it was all over the news in Israel. That field was like 100% of the big fruit, and there was so much fruit to it that was like the branches were breaking, and that one was dry, there wasn't even one.
Really?
So one rotten, like dried out.
Anyway, but I just want to that we should think into this and understand what's going on over here. And then there is a further mitzvah. 7 times 7 is 49 years, and after 49 years there's a 50th year. Just as we have 7 times 7 Sfilah, and then there's a 50th day which is Shavuos, and the years also there's a 50th year, and that year is called Yovel. And in this Yovel year, in addition to the same restrictions that we have on Shemitah, in terms of planting and harvesting, in addition to that, there are 2 other things that take place. That if anyone sold a field that's a family inheritance, he sold it someone during the 50 years, the field returns back to its original. It reverts back to its original owner. Everything is restored back to its original state. And the Torah says clearly, this is not just an explanation from the Chacham. The Torah says, the land belongs to me, Hashem said. The land belongs to me. You are my guest. No, not in the Shvat. Because even if you sell it within the same state, it's the same thing, not that different. The land belongs to me. There is nothing you can do on the land, so to speak, in a beyond such a permanent manner. The way you got the land, that's the way it is. It still belongs to me. You have every right to use it any which way, but it's still mine. That's what the Torah says. Ki li ha'oretz. Li ha'oretz. The land is mine. And another din of Yovel is the din of slaves. That a slave, if Yovel comes in the middle, he goes free. I know that we do not have slavery, no question about it. Slavery is not Heinzkopf, and we do not have any comprehension what the slavery is all about. How can there be slavery? But in Torah Mamash, that there is such a thing. Perhaps after this talk we'll go back and understand a little bit about it. But what is the union of a slave that goes back, that goes out free? So normally a Jewish slave can only be sold, he can only sell himself for 6 years maximum. At 6 years he goes free. What if at the end of 6 years he declares that he wants to stay in servitude to his master? Right. He wants to stay. He doesn't want to leave. So then he can stay. The master has to pierce his ear. He pierces his ear against the doorpost, and then it says in Torah like this. It says, "Va'avodoi lo oilom." Va'avodoi lo oilom means that he will serve him forever. And then he will serve him forever. And then this forever has a limit. What limit is it? 50 years. Not 50 years, till the 50th year. Till Yovel. Huh? No. So Va'avodoi lo oilom, he serves him forever, and forever in this context means forever till the 50th year. How is it called forever? If this is till the 50th year, so it's in 50th year. There's a limit. And this is what I'd like to examine together with you. The Torah calls this forever. And then it defines that this forever means till the 50th year. What does this tell us? It tells us like this. There are two dimensions, two levels in the existence of our world. There is a godly dimension, then there's the world dimension. The godly dimension, this is truly forever, this is eternal. Eternity on the human level is 50 years. Human being does not go beyond it. 50 years, this is called eternal. It's not eternity. Over there is no limit. It doesn't end. It's not a question of eternity. A Jewish slave has to start with a limit, because he don't own him. You know, he belongs to Hashem, so he can belong to a human being for a certain duration of time, and it's called eternity because on the human level, no matter how much ownership we have over the land, over the world, the maximum of our ownership, which we call forever, also has a limit. The real eternity, that remains in God's hands. There is in Hasidus, there is a whole discussion about where do we have the opportunity, if we so desire, we want to focus in and be what's called misboining and understand our world. Where can we recognize God's presence in our world? After all, the world as we know it is all finite. It's constantly changing. Anything that's changing is worldly. Where do we recognize in the world something that's godly, which means it does not change? It has a permanence of a quality that is beyond a worldly possibility. So one example that is given is the sun. The sun gives off light, and in today's terminology, this is called energy. It gives off energy. And it gives off energy for the past 5,500 years. And we know that the sun gives off an enormous amount of energy. I was talking to Professor Braunower. Everybody heard of Professor Braunower? No? Professor Braunower is a Frumenid, he's a religious. He's from Russia. In Russia, he was already a professor. He was an expert on solar energy. And then he came across, and he's now in Israel, and he had the solar energy studies in Israel. Huh? In Beersheba. Very, excuse me?
The University for Solar Energy?
Within the university, they studies. It's a very important, he's a very prestigious person. So I asked him about solar energy. If you take solar energy, so you capture the energy. Actually, you store it away and translate it into electricity, electric energy, or some other things. So wouldn't that affect the global temperature, the global weather? I mean, you're taking away some of the heat, some of the energy that the sun gives into the earth. You're taking it away. You're storing it away.
That's a little bit.
So he said it's so insignificant relative to what the sun gives, it won't have any effect.
Wow.
And we're talking about taking solar energy and transforming it into electricity and actually giving electricity to hundreds and thousands and millions of people. And won't have any effect. So the sun is producing an enormous amount of energy. And this is going on for thousands of years. And there is not a noticeable change in the sun. Not an iota of weakening, of lessening. How do you explain that? This, as this explains, if you reflect on it, you could see that the power behind the sun cannot be limited, so to speak, and contained within the sun itself. In other words, it's a natural thing, and it goes on and it has some kind of combustion and gives off the energy. That it will have to diminish as time goes on. What then does the sun stand for? Where then does the sun get its power and this energy? Hashem says, like we said, like you learned in Tanya, right? The words of Hashem that keep the world going. These words keep the world fresh all the time. So every day the sun gets recreated afresh, the same way as was recreated the first day in creation. Doesn't diminish anything. In other words, as natural as the world is, and we can predict many things, how things affect each other, they're all natural. That's called cause and effect. Cause and effect means there's something that there's a starting point, something that causes, and then there is something that results from it. Absolutely. A natural cycle. This cause and effect element in the world is true only on the superficial level. It's true only on a certain level. Like we said over here, eternity in the world terminology is 50 years by Torah. But eternity in the real sense, the fact that there is such thing as eternity, the fact that that it exceeds 50 years and continues indefinitely, that is not part of the world. That's because of the godly presence in the world. And this is what the Torah says. And this is written, this is interesting. The interesting thing is that this is, even the Chumash, it's not a Pirush Rashi or a Drash. The Torah says, you are but guests. You're citizens. You're living in my land. But the land belongs to me. It belongs to you to a certain level, to a certain degree. But to make permanent changes, there's no way you can do it. There's no way. So this is what I'm saying, that in these two pashas, this pasha, the mitzvah of Shemitah and the mitzvah of Yovel, represent a completely different dimension of mitzvahs and God's presence in our lives. It is not merely what I do. This actually represents the factual presence, that everything that we do, we know it, so to speak, with our seichel, with our beliefs and so forth, but where do we have such a factual effect of it, such a real experience of it? In Shemitah and Yoga, we have real experience of the fact that God is part and parcel of our orientation. We can't think of the world. It's a different world. We can't think of the world without recognizing that the underlying presence, that the presence of the world is based on the underlying presence of God Himself.
Because leave it all up to Hashem by us not working it in the field.
I explained that it's not only because we lead it to the field, but the God claims it back. He takes it back. He says, it's not yours, it's mine. It's an actual presence. It's complete. I'm saying there are many things that we are forbidden to do, but that's because we are forbidden to do it. This is something else. It's in a different category. Reflecting on this element, on this mitzvah, and understanding how the Torah views and the Torah explains to us what is our relationship with Hashem, and what is Hashem's relationship with the world. This can have and should have, really, a very profound effect and illumination which should bring light to every aspect of our life, of our world. I'm going to speak a little bit what's called philosophically, but it's not too intricate. Just want to give a certain illustration. Follow this, very simple, okay? This cup standing on the table, right? So we say, oh, the cup is pretty safe, because the table is holding it up. The table is solid, has 4 legs, doesn't shake. It was made by Gershon, it's fine. We can rely on it. The table is standing on the floor. The floor, pretty solid. Why? It's supported by beams that are being held up by the foundation of the floor of the house.
That's not safe.
No.
The foundations of this.
No, come on, don't ruin it.
It's okay. The foundation of the house is founded on the ground, on the earth, right? You dig deep down into the ground and pour down cement, a 5-foot wide wall of cement. That is solid in the ground. Now it's being held up by the ground, right? Mm-hmm. So what do we have? The ground is holding up the wall of the house. The wall of the house is holding up the beam is holding up the floor is holding up the table is holding up the cup. Now, I go a step further, a much step further. Who is holding up the earth? What's holding up the earth?
No, okay.
What's holding up the earth?
Yeah, all of us.
One second. What's holding up the earth? So this whole solid structure is all of a sudden in midair. Right? The earth is floating in mid-air. Al-Blima. That's called Al-Blima. We say it in davening, Rosh Hashanah. If you remember. Toile Eretz Al-Blima. Hashem suspends. Suspense means make it hang. The earth, Al-Blima, on nothingness. Al-Blima on non-entity. Toile Eretz Al-Blima. So now that we know that the earth is suspended on nothingness,
No, it feels safe.
so now if the earth is suspended, the earth itself is suspended on nothingness, then that permeates, that protrudes through the entire structure. If the earth itself is suspended on nothingness, so then the foundation is suspended on nothingness, and then the floor is suspended on nothingness, and then the table is suspended on nothingness, and then the cup is suspended on nothingness. What is this nothingness? Nothingness is something. God wants the earth to be. That is the place of the earth. And if the earth is holding up the foundation and holding up the floor and holding up the table, holding up the cup, ultimately, the real truth is it's all suspended on God's will. Even though we have what's called a natural way of explaining things, cause and effect, we can put this on the table, we can predict how it's going to work, but ultimately, this entire structure is really suspended by God's will. This is where we become, so to speak, face to face, where we have a direct recognition of God's presence in our life. Regardless of the fact that we can logically explain various things that occur in our life, that we are dealing with, just like we said before, we have 50 years. 50 years is an eternity. But there is an eternity that's beyond that eternity. There's a human eternity, that sort of be within the limits of natural world. But that eternity does not stand on its own. That eternity is being suspended and held up by a godly eternity, which is of a totally different quality, and there is no way we don't have a logical, we don't have a human way of understanding it. Just like we do not understand how it is that the sun is giving off energy for 5,000 years, 5,500 years, and not diminishing, not diminishing the same power. On the contrary, what is the latest concern? Overheating. Too much. Global warming. I'm sorry? Yeah, it's all propaganda, whatever it is. But the point is, certainly we're not concerned about the sun becoming weaker, burning out.
Global change.
Okay.
Some places get cooler, some places hotter.
What I'd like to bring back, we're learning here, we're learning in Yeshiva, we're learning Chassidus, and there are many things that you learn in Chassidus. It talks about the Neshama, talks about Chochma, Bina, V'das, intellect, Midos, Machshava, Dibur, Maisa, and we're learning about this, and it seems like we have terms that are some kind of mystical thing. What is Chochmah? Some kind of an idea. What is Bina? Some kind of an idea. Midas, an idea. This an idea, that an idea.
Something idea.
I'd like you to understand that the godly presence in our lives and in our world is not an idea. It's an idea only in the sense that we don't understand godliness. We cannot measure it. We cannot capture it. It's not tangible. But its reality is right there. Not only is it reality there, because we recognize it's there, but we even are privileged to live with that recognition. Our very lives are circumscribed, are defined along these principles. We have Shemitah. Who in his right mind would say, don't plant the 7th year? What are you going to eat the 7th year? If you were looking at the world, so to speak, from a natural perspective, well, what are you talking about? Wait a second, it's not your land. Comes Yovel. You sold me the land. Wait a second, it's not your land. We are privileged. We were given this supreme level, a supreme level of reality, that we live in our lives. We relate to the real reality, to eternity on a godly level, the godly eternity, rather than what we call the human eternity, the worldly eternity. using the analogy of the earth being suspended in mid-air. And as a result of that, we follow through and we say, therefore the cup is also suspended in mid-air on God's will. Because ultimately, it's the same miracle that the earth is suspended, that suspends the cup. How is it, what does this mean in practical now terms? What it means is that every time that I do a mitzvah, regardless of which mitzvah I put on tefillin, or I make a bracha and eat something, or I shnegel das, or whatever, or I give tzedakah, regardless of which mitzvah, small or big, every mitzvah relates back to that which suspends the world in mid-air. Because that's what facilitates it all. They have a direct, makes it possible. Just as what gives the earth the ability to hold up this cup is the Rebbe is holding up the earth, same thing is in every mitzvah. Every mitzvah. Even though it's a limited thing, I'm measuring how much tzedakah do I give, how much I can give, a tenth, whatever it is, how much I can. It's all measured on my terms. Yes, it's measured on my terms. It's in the Rebbe. He gave us the privilege, gave us the limit that we should measure it, so to speak, in human ability. But what does it relate to? What is the basis of it? And what kind of reality does it ultimately relate to? It is the godly reality. When we sit down to learn Torah, before you learn Torah al Pidin, you have to make a bracha, Dichas HaTorah. You all know that, right? In the morning you all make Dichas HaTorah, and before you make Dichas HaTorah, you're not allowed to learn.
Not allowed to what?
To learn Torah.
Yeah.
Not allowed to learn Torah before you make Dichas HaTorah. Even though, what am I going to learn? I'm going to pick a book from the shelf that's already pre-printed. I'm going to learn that book. I'm learning that book that's printed that's pre-printed. But who is teaching it to me? The one who gave the Torah of Hashem. It's the same thing. It's one continuous unity. That unity can never be severed, broken. This is a phenomenal union, and today's Parsha brings it to life. That the in everything that we do, small or big, whether even in natural elements in our lives, eating and sleeping and washing your clothes, no matter what. Everything, it reverts back, everything is connected back to the ultimate truth. The Rebbe is the one who created the world. The Rebbe is the one who created human beings. The Rebbe is the one who created the Jewish people. The Rebbe is the one who gave the Jewish people the Torah, and he taught us how to live a godly life. So when one reflects on this reality, and he gets up in the morning and he says, "Oh, I'm lazy, I'm too tired." What's the matter with you? You shouldn't do harm to yourself. You shouldn't do this to yourself. A young man is supposed to sit up. I have to go and get up and do, and this. Wait a second. Reflect on the ultimate reality that's going on. Who woke you up, as we say in the morning when we wake up? There's a godly presence that participates in absolutely every element of our lives. And this is not a theoretical thing. This is a factual thing. Except that the Rebbe camouflages it. He hides it, so it wouldn't be overwhelming. Just like Hashem camouflages the fact that this cup is being held up miraculously in mid-air. No, it's not a miracle. It's sitting on the table. Think about it and you'll see that it is a miracle. It's there because that's the way it is. That's the way the Rebbe creates the world. But it's presented to us in a finite manner, in a limited way, so that we can keep our senses, stay sane within the limits of our within the limits of our capacity, of our intellectual capacity. Nevertheless, it is incumbent and it's important for us, we're not fools, to reflect and say, I woke up in the morning, that's a miracle. My neshama was returned back to me. That's a godly deed. And any action that I do, it's not within, it doesn't stay, so to speak, within the context of the world. It relates all the way back to the real truth, to Hashem Himself, to the real truth, to Hashem's. The reason I'm doing whatever it is because Hashem wants me to do it, tells me to do it, and gives me the ability and the opportunity to do it, and the energy to do it. It all goes back to the real source, to the real source. Just as this is another insight which I can't elaborate now for too long, but we all learned in Chassidus to know this, that even though our actions are accomplished through our hand, where does our hand get the ability to act? From the neshama. How does it come to the?
On the neshama?
What?
What was the last word you said?
From the neshama.
From the neshama.
Where is, right? How does it end up in our hand? It goes through the process. The neshama goes to the brain energizes, gives life and direction to the heart, to the emotion, and from the emotion it comes into thought, speech, and deed, and this is how the action takes place. But what is the ultimate source of this energy?
God.
The ultimate source of this energy is this neshama, the soul itself. It's not my brain that's moving it. It's not my heart. It's the neshama itself. The similar way it is true that in every aspect of our lives, every small or big, you have to remember the real source of all blessing, the real source of all both opportunity and ability to accomplish what we do is coming directly from Hashem Himself, and therefore it is truly unlimited. And you have to know that in terms of the possibility of growth and success that we have, even though our perception of eternity is 50 years, it's not limited to that. The limit, there's no limit, because it's all provided by Hashem. Just one more point. This is similar to what we have in Hilchos Shabbos. You know Shabbos? Shabbos, that it's known that there are 4 different domains in Shabbos. I don't know if you learned about this, but 2 domains you all know. There's the Reshus HaYochid and the Reshus HaRabbi. Public domain and private domain. Huh? Carmelis and Mokim Shtur. So, in Reshus HaYochid, in the private domain, you're allowed to carry on Shabbos. In a public domain, you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos beyond 4 hours. To transmit an article from one domain to the other is forbidden. What makes a private domain? Anybody know?
Your place, your surroundings.
No, people,
What?
The surroundings of your gate, your fence, your
A
surroundings.
fence. It doesn't have to be yours. If you make a
No, I mean,
fence,
let's say you need someone's house on Shabbos and you're in that place.
private domain means Reshus HaYochid doesn't have to be owned. If you're in a field and you put up a fence at 10 tefachim high, 10 tefachim high, 10 tefachim is approximately 20 inches, 30 inches, 40 inches, let's say. I mean, whatever, it's not extremely high, okay? You put up a fence are 40 inches high, and you put it up on 4 sides, even though up again you don't even need 4 sides. And that makes it a private domain. This private domain is clearly part of Hashem's world. There's no question, it didn't change anything. It's part of Hashem's world. Except Hashem had given the human being, the ability to live within the limits of his intellect. To us, something demonstrated by time talking is a separate entity. But it remains in Hashem's world. This is the similar union that we discussed all the time. So this is, I think, enormously energizing, enormously encouraging to recognize that even though we seem to be, one day is like the year next, this is so to speak, it becomes repetitive and nothing. It's not. It gets recreated all the time. And our participation in this creation is never repetitive, because every day we don't even realize how we grow. And however, after a period of a month, we don't recognize each other. In a period of a year, we can grow indefinitely, completely out of the limits of the human limits. It all depends how much we put in and how we relate to it. Yes, your question.
You said that through the neshama the body lives. How could a spiritual thing give physical energy?
How does the world held up on nothingness?
Yeah, but it's like you should say that it's
It's not a natural explanation.
There's no gravity in space, so it's...
There's no.
Sort of fly away. Everything, other things are flying
There's
away.
this is beyond, this is what's called a godly phenomenon. And really there is no logical way to explain it. There's no, so to speak, just like you said, we can't explain why the sun doesn't diminish over thousands of years. My point is, there is a godly phenomenon if we so choose to appreciate and to recognize all around us. And certainly, the point that you're making, how does a soul, a godly, ruchnis, give energy to a physical body, that is in fact one of the miracles. And you know something? It said in Shulchan Aruch. You know when you make a bracha, when you after coming out of the bathroom, what bracha do you say? Asher Yotzar. And you mention the fact that Hashem created the human being in such miraculous way, all kinds of different things, and everything has to jive perfectly exactly. And what is the end of the bracha?
Thank you.
Mafli Lasis. What's Mafli Lasis? It's a wonder. Because this whole thing is a wonder. No matter how much you explain, there are these pipes and these lines and this is the whole thing. Ultimately, is a miracle. And this is the principle of maturity, of intellectual maturity. Intellectual maturity is when a human being can think freely like a human being thinks, rather than being a captive in the physical world. Say, hey, I can't see it materially. I cannot. There's nothing. You're not showing it to me in some tangible manner. That's keeping the human being enslaved to the physical world. The human being is not supposed to be a slave to it. The human being is supposed to be able to think freely the way a human being thinks. And the way a human being thinks, he says, I see God's hand in everything that I see. It does not mean that I'm flying off the deep end. I'm still acting within the realms and the limits of human intellect. And 50 years, as far as I'm concerned, is an eternity. That's as far as I'm concerned, but that's not the reality itself. With this principle in mind, and as a reminder, the Pashas Bahar the mitzvah of Shemitah, the mitzvah of Yovel. Rabbi should help each one of us here to stay energized, stay refreshed, day in, day out, and to grow indefinitely. While we stay within our confines, while we act rationally, absolutely, and at the same time, we know that we live in a world that is bigger than world.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.